Johnny McMullen, what's going on, my friend? How was your day at the Lincoln Financial Field there yesterday?
Oh, who doesn't want to be at the link for a last-minute practice shipped over there?
Expedited practice there. What's going on, everybody? How you doing? My name is Mark Farzetta. I am a Mark, not a Mac. I'm filling in for one of the Macs, Jody Mac, today and tomorrow as well. John McMullen will be with us here for the first half hour of the show. Look forward to that conversation. We'll also be joined by Bill Calarulo, who will be joining us coming up at 8:30, shortly after 8:30. And then we'll be joined by Mike Gill of 97.3 ESPN South Jersey to talk all things Eagles and kind of look around the NFC East to see if there even really is a threat to the Eagles at this point. So now's the time where we feel ourselves a little bit there, John. But the Eagles were feeling themselves a little bit of practice yesterday. Here's what I find interesting. John, yesterday was such a big day in Philadelphia sports that there was from what I understand, a vicious fight at training camp. And nobody gives a damn because Michael Lorenzen threw a no-hitter yesterday for the Phils. But a fight nonetheless. What happened in that little tussle?
Yeah, well, I don't think it was a fight. I think it was more of a pushing match. But, yeah, because it involved Derek Barnett, I think it got a little bit more hype than it probably deserved. You know, I happened to be standing basically right in front of it, and I was on the defensive side. And I saw, it kind of depends where you are, right? If you're doing these things, it's not on TV. A lot of guys are on the other side of the sideline with the offensive guys. It's Derek Barnett. He's got the reputation. But I got to tell you, Mark, I was like 10 feet away from the defensive guys. They were not happy. They thought it was a dirty block. And it was borderline. And all of a sudden, Derek Barnett gets up, pushes Landon Dickerson. Then it becomes, oh, it's Derek Barnett. It's always him, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not so sure about that. People are going to default to because of Derek's reputation. But it's one of those things in camp, I think it was definitely overblown because of who was involved. Ultimately, though, it's not a penalty unless they call it, and they didn't call it. And Derek Barnett's got to get – that's the legitimate criticism. If it's a game, maybe you did get screwed, but you can't make it worse by getting 15 yards on top of it, and we've seen that too much with Derek Barnett.
Just looking at people's account of the situation and reading your account of the situation and listening to it right there, it sounds like the hit wasn't necessary for it being a practice for a guy returning from an ACL injury.
Well, yeah, that's part of it too. He's returning from there was one defensive player who was really fired up from the sidelines, veteran defensive player. I don't want to, but, basically said, clean it up, even though we don't have to on YouTube. Come on, Landon, one of those types of things. So, yeah. Probably not necessary for a guy coming back from an ACL injury. And that's probably why he was a little bit more upset than maybe he would have been if it were a normal situation where he wasn't coming off that rehab. And maybe the underreported part of all of this is, man, they're trying to get Derek Barnett involved. I'm sitting here looking at this defensive line, and we were talking about Moro Jomo, rookie, speaking after practice. They have so many guys who belong in the NFL. You can't play all of them. And Derek Barnett, he's like the fifth edge rusher, but it's only practice, right? But they're trying to get him involved. And I'm talking first team reps. It's Sean Desai's throwing he's throwing the kitchen sink at the offense over the past couple of days. I don't know if I think it's more about evaluation, trying to see what he has with certain players. But I think I mentioned yesterday on the show with you, he had a 4 safety look, he had a 4 defensive tackle look, some of this wacky stuff. And Derek Barnett's part of that. They got those 5-man fronts. Josh Sweat's dropping into coverage. Derek Barnett's dropping into coverage. Some wacky stuff. So maybe Eagles fans will get what they want because, they thought Jonathan Gannon was too vanilla.
Right. To just put as Jody would say, to put a bow on the tussle, the shoving match, just as far as what started it, did you think that the block was, you said borderline maybe? Did you think it was an unnecessary kind of hit for a practice? Did you think it was called for? What did you think of it?
It was a wide receiver screen, which, you know, for anyone who watches this show, drives me crazy. I can't stand that play. It's the ugliest play in football.
I did not know that, but I literally just ended my show with a rant on the bubble screens because I am not a fan of the wide receiver bubble screen. But yes, go ahead.
And by the way, it worked. They got a first down. It was a backed up period. But that's the thing. In college, it's kind of fine. I think, you know, that kind of trickled up from college. College is like the wild, wild west. You can block whoever the hell you want. You can go downfield. They don't care half the time. In the NFL, they're more stringent. How many of those illegal man downfield penalties have we seen for the Eagles over the past 2 years since Nick Sirianni has gotten there? They're a lot stricter. So my point of saying that is they could have called it a penalty. They might have not called it a penalty. The officials on the field didn't call it a penalty. In a real game, they might have. And that's why I say borderline. So it was successful on that particular day. But, yeah, I'm not in love. I'm not in love with the play, as people know.
So to back to what you were saying about Derek Barnett, because it's going to be a conversation that we're going to talk about, or is going to be a talking point for the rest of the show. I love using this line because it's one of my favorite movies ever. But when it comes to Derek Barnett, I'm reminded of the line from Office Space. What is it you say you do here? Really? So looking at Derek Barnett, I look at him. Look, I root for everybody that puts on a Philadelphia Eagles jersey. I want them to have a great year. I want them to give this city a parade. I want us to have a party because of how they play. But with Derek Barnett, I think the most optimistic thing I could say about him is he will be a decent rotational player. Is that the bar for Derek Barnett? Do the Eagles actually think it's higher than that? Do you agree with that bar? Where do you sit on Derek Barnett and what it is exactly that he does here?
I agree with your description. He's a solid rotational player. Yeah, the Eagles think more of him than everybody else. They like him as a player. They think he's a really good player. Jody and I have discussion all the time. He was a first-round pick, right? And he's a disappointment as a first-round pick. And Jody will always say, at some point, you got to forget about the pedigree. Like TJ Edwards turned into a great player, but he was undrafted. Some people won't come off that. They're like, hey, but he was undrafted. Look at him on the field. Now I'm seeing the same thing with Reed Blankenship. Guy's just a good player. I don't care if he was undrafted. I don't know if he's going to get to TJ's level, but we'll see. Conversely, and this is where Jody and I take pass, like he won't get off the fact that he was a first-round pick. So my point is the two things are not mutually exclusive. Yes, he shouldn't have been a first-round pick, but that doesn't make him a bad football player. In other words, if he were picked in the third or fourth round, you'd say, oh, that guy's pretty good. So at some point, you have to put that, it works both ways. You have to put the first round nonsense in the background and say, well, can he help me? Is he a good football player? He's a good football player. Is he worthy of being the 14th pick in the draft? No. And that's why guys like that usually get their second chance in other cities, because people never forget it. He's a first-round pick. He's a first-round pick. He's a first-round. He didn't live up to it. He's not Reggie White. He went to Tennessee, broke his sack records. All that nonsense. He carries that baggage in Philadelphia. If he went to another city, and probably Derek should have, to be honest, he would have gotten a second chance, and they would have been, he's a pretty good player. He's a rotational defensive end. That's what I think he is. But the Eagles don't even need that if they're healthy, because it's Reddick, it's Sweat, it's BG, and it's Nolan Smith. It's a great insurance policy if one of those guys gets hurt. but it's an insurance policy.
A luxury, maybe. Yeah. Even. Yeah. So to your point, because he's a first round, I mean, let's call it what it is. If he's not a first round pick, is he still here?
Yes.
Oh, you think he is still here?
In fact, I think he'd be, if he was a third round pick, I think, you know, he'd be in better stead, because they would, you know, he'd have it would be a different framework. It would be, oh, that guy's solid. But once you have that tag, you're the 14th pick in the draft. The 13th pick was Hassan Reddick. Once you have that tag on you, you got to perform like you're the 14th pick in the draft. So yeah, that has certainly hurt him in this city. People will not recognize he's not a terrible player. And, you know, there are certain guys you will see that, you know, well, you know, we're up against it if they're on the field. If you're a fan, Nicholas Morrow, you're probably up against it. If he's got to play a lot, it's probably going to be an issue. He's not that guy. He's a solid player, not a great player, solid player.
Gotcha. One of the things I saw, I think you were on with Mike Gill yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. I think you were doing a hit with Mike, who's going to be our guest at 9:20 today. And you were talking about the backfield. And Nick Sirianni has said the same thing about the running backs as he said pretty much about the right guard spot. There might be a front runner, but Nick Sirianni says, oh, no, Cam Jurgens, I don't have to name the number one guy just yet, so we're not going to say anything. But this backfield, there's the stable of running backs that the Eagles have right now with Kenny Gainwell and DeAndre Swift and obviously Rashad Penny and all these guys. Everyone knows the roster. But there seems to be a front runner for the guy that's closest to RB1 right now. Who is that man, John McMullen?
Kenny Gainwell.
Kenny Gainwell. What?
Yeah. I know. I get so much grief over that. Like, what do you, I'll never stop saying it, Mark. I think people want me to lie to them. Look, I mean, just because you think Rashad Penny is Rashad Penny, first round pick coming into the league when he was healthy. All right. He's not that. He's been injured 150 times. DeAndre Swift, St. Joe's Prep, Billy Kid, blah, blah, blah. He went to Georgia, 35th pick in the draft. He's never run for more than 617 yards. They like Kenny Gainwell. And Kenny Gainwell is the one getting the most reps with the first team. And more than that, getting the most high leverage reps. They were backed up on that drill we were just talking about with Derek Barnett. That came in a backed up period where they're coming off the goal line at the 2-yard line. So they work on that. Who was in there? First down rush for 5 yards? Kenny Gainwell. Red zone work, first team. Who's in there? Kenny Gainwell. First team, running it up the middle. It's August 10th. You know, over the next week, they have 2 preseason games. They have 2 joint practices with the Cleveland Browns. There's still time for other people to close the gap, especially with the pads on at that particular position. But if they were playing a game, if they were playing a real game against Baltimore on Saturday, Kenny Gainwell would be the starting running back.
Wow. I know a lot of people looking at that and they're surprised because they, like you said, they want to be lied to, but you got to tell it. You got to call it as you see it there, John. So I'll ask you this: with Kenny Gainwell being here, DeAndre Swift being here, and like I mentioned, the stable of running backs and all that, are the Eagles going to miss Miles Sanders this year, or are they going to be pretty set at the running back position?
I don't think they're going to miss him that much, but I think it has more to do with the quarterback and the offensive line, to be honest. You know, I think the quarterback helps the running backs on this team by manipulating the spacing of the defense. And the offensive line is just, you know, if those guys are healthy, and yeah, Cam Jurgens, sorry, Nick, he's the starter at right guard. You're not fooling anybody. He's looked fine. No issues whatsoever. It's the best offensive line in football. The Eagles' defense, Mark, cannot stop the quarterback run game. They can't. It's embarrassing. And part of that is Jalen Hurts. But they can't even stop it with Marcus Mariota. They can't stop it. And that's part. Luckily, if you look at their schedule, they start out with Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins and I forget who week 3, Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. They don't see somebody who can gash them like Jalen could until Josh Allen in November, like Thanksgiving time, barring injuries or, other quarterbacks, backups starting to play, things like that. But they're really having a difficult time of it. And that's Jalen. I mean, it's hard to stop. +1 in the running game means +1 in the running game. You can't account for him. That's why it's so difficult. So I don't think they have a running back as good as Miles Sanders, but I don't think they will miss him that much.
Should I be worried about Sean Desai getting sliced up by Jalen Hurts and Marcus Mariota? Should that be a concern?
A little bit.
I mean, they are wearing red jerseys. I mean, I will say that.
They are wearing red jerseys, but, to hit somebody, you would have to be near them.
Fair point.
When they run the quarterback draw, it's like the Red Sea parting. Yeah, I would be worried a little bit about it. But if you look at their schedule, they don't base many guys. Like they're not basing Lamar Jackson. They're not basing the kid in Indianapolis. They are in the preseason. But, like I said, Josh Allen would be the first one, which is Thanksgiving time. So they luck out a little bit from that perspective. So I wouldn't be terribly concerned. But when it does arrive, they don't look prepared. Now, it's August 10th. Part of that is N'Kobe's not there, although when N'Kobe was healthy, they couldn't stop it. Miles Jack just got here. Zach Cunningham just got here. They don't have linebackers. That's part of it. But, yeah, I mean, they haven't been good at it defensively. I don't think that's necessarily Sean Desai driven. I'm more concerned that Howie Roseman's got to scream at the defensive coordinator that, oh, this is 1 versus 2s, Mr. Attention to Detail. I'm more concerned about the sloppiness than anything else.
Right. I got 3 more things I want to tee up for, and that's definitely one of them. So you brought it up. What happened? Howie Roseman had to correct Sean Desai as to what drills they were running?
Yes. Not a good look.
Okay, first let me just interject for 1 second. For anyone that ever thinks that Howie Roseman doesn't have his fingerprints on everything, remember this story. Now the floor is yours when it comes to Howie Roseman telling Sean Desai, "Hey, we did the wrong drill, bro. What happened? What happened there?"
Yeah, I mean that basically sums it up. Yeah. No, I mean, people are going to overblow because it's Howie. Like, if you remember, Jonathan mentioned Howie. I asked him a question. I forget the question it was, and he was talking about Howie in game planning. And we get together with Nick and Howie, and people are like, "You get together with Howie game planning?"
Right? Yeah.
And he just kind of misspoke. He was talking about roster. Obviously, Howie's in charge of the roster. So he was talking about personnel, who's up, who's not up, things like that. He's not involved with game planning. Similar type of thing. Howie's not always, but usually on the field. He is very involved. And, they missed the defensive staff, and it's not just Sean. And that's the bigger concern. All right, it's not like this is new. The Eagles kind of do it that way. It's usually 1s versus 1s, but then they have a period where it's 1s versus 2s, and they didn't get the memo. and Howie was just correcting him because he was closest to him. So it'll get overblown, but it ain't good.
It doesn't sound great. Doesn't sound great.
No. And the Eagles, by the way, already got, upset about it. Howie's not doing that. Because, and that's true. It's not like he's being overbearing or yelling at the defensive coordinator who's just trying to get the right people in for the drill. But that's Sean's job. Get the right people in for the stinking drill. And by the way, Nick Sirianni said, why'd you hire Sean Desai? Great attention to detail. Really? Well, that's not great attention to detail.
For what it's worth, I remember Chip Kelly talking about Billy Davis with a great attention to detail. But anyway, a couple more for you. It's going to live rent-free in my head. Nakobe Dean was somehow magically back at practice yesterday. What was his status at practice? How did he look at practice after the Eagles made 2 acquisitions at the linebacker position in Cunningham and Jack? All of a sudden, Nakobe Dean's back out there. What was he doing? How did he look?
He was back, but limited, only worked in individual drills, so he didn't do any teamwork. So we're not going to get a feel for how the Eagles are going to handle linebacker moving forward until he gets back on the field, probably against Cleveland. I doubt very much he plays against Baltimore, or they put him back in team drills today, because then you get the question, well, why is he not playing against Baltimore? So my guess is he'll be limited again today. He will not play in the game, and then he'll be back next week for the joint practices against Cleveland. And then you'll get to see how they're going to handle it, because until Nakobe's there, like Miles Jack, it's kind of, they threw him right in. He's getting first team reps with Nick Morrow as sort of a pass defense duo. And then he's getting third team reps with Ben Van Sumeren. And Zach Cunningham's getting second team reps with Sean Bradley. That's how they've been handling it without Nakobe. With Nakobe, I get the sense that they think Zach is the better run defender and Miles is the better pass defender. So they might piecemeal it. Early downs, Nakobe, Zach Cunningham. Obvious passing situations, Nakobe, Miles Jack. Or it could be they both have nothing left and they go with Christian Ellis or Nick Morrow or Mark Barzetta or somebody outside the organization.
Yeah.
Everything's on the table at linebacker.
I can go side to side, John. I can go side to side, man. Sideline to sideline all day.
Good lateral movement.
Oh, absolutely. Great hit movement, no doubt.
Tremendous lateral movement. You're a Manny Mota-like pinch hitter on Birds 365. You do it all.
Hey, you've seen me hoop, man. You were our coach. You were what? Yeah. When we took on the what was it, the Sprinklers Union?
Yeah, I'm 0-2. Shockingly,
John. You know what? I think you've lost the locker room. To be honest with you, when Miles Jack addressed the media yesterday, and he was talking about jobs he was going to undertake if he didn't return as a linebacker in the NFL. How close did he really get to trade school, John? He said he wanted to be a plumber or a carpenter or an electrician or something. Yeah. Electrician. Yeah. Wait, we might be playing basketball against him next year. Who knows? But how serious was he about applying his, for trade school?
I think it was pretty serious. I mean, he said he's got a lot of money. He doesn't have to do anything, but he's not one of those people that wants to sit around and do nothing. So I think it was pretty serious. I like the fact that he's like, for the pending zombie apocalypse, he wants to be able to build something or fix something in case, you got to be ready for the zombies. So I like his thought process. I'm dead in the water if the zombies show up. I can't fix anything. So
I was going to ask you 2 things on this subject, John, just for some funsies here before we wrap up with you and you go to your Eagles responsibilities here. If it was a zombie apocalypse, what's John McMullen doing? What are you, like the first to go on the TV show for zombie apocalypse?
I'm the first to go.
Oh,
I've had 6 knee operations. I don't have good lateral movement, Mark. So it depends. Is it World War Z zombies that chase you down like they run 4.4 in the 40?
Oh.
I got no shot. If it's the old school, walking like, they move 10 inches every 10 minutes, then I got some savvy. I can survive that. But if they can run like the Brad Pitt movie, yeah, I got no shot.
Gotcha. All right, and then this last one. If you weren't writing, John, what would you be doing? Would you be an electrician? Would you be a carpenter? What would you be doing if you weren't writing? What's the gig for John McMullen if he's not writing? Or obviously hosting Birds 365?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd probably be living under a bridge somewhere. I don't. No. I should just
be a troll living under the Walt Whitman.
No, you don't want to be under that. I'm trying to figure out how I can fend for myself. It's funny. It's funny you bring this up, Mark, because to my parents, I was like a genius because I could do little things around the house. I could fix little issues. To my wife, I'm the biggest idiot in the world because I can't do, I can't change doors, or I can't build a shed, or, I'm not Amish. So it depends. It depends on who is sort of valuing you or judging you, Like I can use a screwdriver. So I beat my, and a hammer. So I beat my parents. They thought I was Mr. Handyman, and the opposite with my wife. So,
what does your father do for a living?
He was Newman on Seinfeld. He was a U.S. postal worker for many years.
Well, you do know the difference between a flathead and a Phillips head screwdriver?
Oh yeah.
Off and running. We're off and running, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, I got the tool. I got the whole thing. I'm like the Derek Barnett of handiwork. I'm competent, but I'm not a first round pick.
Gotcha. I can relate a little bit to that. My father-in-law was not Mr. Fix-It, and I remember taking out my ratchet set, with my tools and all that stuff.
Yeah, I got a ratchet set. See, that's what.
Yeah. And my wife goes, "What are those?" And I'm like, you never got this for your dad for like Father's Day? She's like, "Oh God, no." Like, Frankie Wrong Wrench? Not a chance. John, anybody you're looking forward to see maybe break out a little bit over the next practice or so before the kickoff on Saturday?
Well, there's only one practice. I think, what are they going to do in that game in Baltimore? I had to go back to last year. The starters did play for the one series, and Jalen Hurts was perfect, 6 for 6, but which kind of foreshadowed the season in many ways. But this year they have Cleveland coming in like immediately, on it'll be Saturday, it'll be Monday. So, and that's when they want the starters to get all the work. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it from a playing time standpoint. And then the greatest streak in sports, the Eagles have a chance to make history by stopping the Ravens 23 game preseason winning streak, which is unbelievable. That thing. How do you win 23 consecutive preseason games?
I don't know. I think you have to really try hard to win 23 consecutive preseason games, and I think that is what I think that in general, I think that's what a hardball is all about. John, great catching up with you as always. You and me tomorrow for the entirety of the show, so I look forward to that, John.
Yeah, I feel for you, but thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
We'll have plenty more zombie apocalypse talk,
yes,
and how we can help our communities after the apocalypse. We'll be back coming up. We'll be joined by Bill Colarulo of Legal Hands to the Face. He'll be joining us for the next 90 minutes. Mike Gill will join us at 9:20. He'll be right back here on Birds 365. John, thanks again.
Thanks, Mike.